I am Lauren Bennett, 34 years old, and today I found myself at my sister Ashley's lavish wedding reception in Manhattan. The grand chandelier glimmered above, casting prisms across the polished marble floor. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits chatted, clinking champagne glasses, unaware of the storm brewing silently behind my calm exterior. I carried myself with the poise my years of perseverance had taught me, though beneath it all was a quiet, simmering anticipation. A hidden truth that would eventually upend everything they assumed about me. Ashley, my elder by 4 years, always radiated effortless perfection. She had the golden curls, the sparkling eyes, the easy laughter that drew admiration wherever she went. Our parents, Patricia and Charles Bennett, lavished her with praise, often overlooking my quieter accomplishments. When Ashley earned her Ivy League scholarship, our parents threw a party, taking photographs that adorned the walls of our family home. When I brought home top marks in advanced programming competitions, they offered a polite nod as though it were merely expected. I was the shadow that lingered behind, always competent yet perpetually undervalued. From the earliest years, the pattern of unequal recognition had been painfully clear. My 10th birthday stands out vividly. I had eagerly awaited the small gathering my mother promised, only to have it abruptly canceled because Ashley had a dance recital that morning. "We'll celebrate another day," my mother said with a forced smile. The day passed quietly. No cake, no friends, no presents that year. The sting of disappointment became familiar, a shadow stitched into the fabric of my childhood. Graduation ceremonies followed similar scripts, my achievements overlooked for Ashley's accolades. Each incident etched a subtle, quiet resentment, a realization that familial love often came with conditions I could never meet. Financial dynamics added another layer of betrayal. When I was a teenager, I discovered my father had established a trust account for Ashley, funding her college tuition and extracurricular programs in full. Meanwhile, I applied for scholarships, took out small student loans, and funded my own technology camps and competitions. It was never about the money for me, yet the comparison lingered in every glance, every remark, subtle or otherwise. Even when I managed to help my family behind the scenes, offering support anonymously during medical emergencies or unexpected bills, they never suspected my involvement. I quietly paid $75,000 for my mother's unexpected medical procedure, funded a down payment for Ashley's condo through a separate account, and yet no one ever knew it was me. The irony was almost bitterly poetic. Little did I realize that these early experiences, these quiet humiliations and understated acts of generosity were sculpting the very resolve that would define my future. For years, I had been the reliable, overlooked one, the silent observer, calculating, learning, waiting. Each subtle dismissal, each casual remark about my modest lifestyle only hardened the resolve in me. When Ashley, with all her poised confidence, glanced my way during the cocktail hour tonight and whispered a comment just loud enough for a few select guests to hear, I felt a familiar spark of clarity. "Some people just show up for the free food," she said, her voice coated with that infuriatingly practiced sweetness. I smiled, politely nodded, and let the comment slide, though beneath it an intricate plan had already begun to crystallize. What they didn't know was that every slight, every overlooked achievement, every act of quiet generosity had built a foundation far more potent than any parade of praise could ever offer. I was no longer the overlooked shadow. I was the storm waiting silently in the wings. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from, because if you have ever been the family disappointment or felt invisible in a room full of recognition and accolades for someone else, you will understand the quiet simmering determination I had spent decades cultivating. By the time the evening drew to a crescendo and toasts were made, I knew that the narrative of my family, so carefully curated and heavily biased, was about to be challenged in ways they could never anticipate. What I didn't know yet, of course, was just how public, how irreversible, and how sweetly ironic that reckoning would be. As I watched the elegant reception unfold, memories from years past began to surface, sharp and vivid. Growing up in our family's stately brownstone on the Upper East Side, the expectations had always been clear. Ashley was the standard-bearer, the golden child who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was quietly passionate about technology, computers, and coding interests my parents barely acknowledged. My father, Charles, a successful finance executive, often dismissed my curiosity with a shake of his head. "Lauren, real women lead organizations, not hide behind screens," he would say, and my mother, Patricia, would nod, reinforcing the message. While Ashley's piano recitals and ballet performances earned applause and framed photographs, my late-night programming sessions earned only polite tolerance, if that. At 18, I had earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university, a feat that should have warranted pride. Instead, when I announced my acceptance, my mother merely said, "That's what we expect." Her tone distant, her attention already elsewhere. Ashley, of course, had her own path perfectly aligned with parental approval, graduating with honors, securing internships at top firms, and ultimately marrying into a wealthy family who matched the Bennett image. My achievements, no matter how groundbreaking, were measured against hers and always came up short. The pivotal moment came during my sophomore year when I discovered a serious security flaw in the university's network system that could have compromised thousands of student records. I spent countless hours patching the vulnerability and reporting it to the administration, ensuring no breach occurred. In my eyes, it was an accomplishment that demanded recognition. In my family's eyes, it was just another of my side projects. When I told my parents, Charles exhaled sharply. "You threw away a proper education for this," he said. My mother, Patricia, cried silently in the background, not from pride but from disbelief. And Ashley, ever loyal to their expectations, looked at me with the kind of cold, calculated pity that one reserves for someone clearly lost. I left school shortly after, determined to follow my own path and launch a cybersecurity startup. Those early days were brutal. My savings dwindled quickly. Ramen noodles and coffee became staples. By necessity, I applied for food assistance, something I never imagined I would have to do. It was during this period that the first whispers of humiliation surfaced. Somehow, Ashley discovered my situation through mutual acquaintances and didn't hesitate to make mention of it during family gatherings. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner vividly. As I passed the mashed potatoes, she leaned in with that sweet, poisonous smile. "At least you're getting free food somewhere since you can't afford to contribute here," she said. Laughter erupted quietly at the table, and I simply nodded, swallowing my pride and keeping my composure. That single line encapsulated the entire dynamic: invisible effort, constant judgment, and public shaming. But it was also in those early lonely months that the foundation for my resilience was laid. Every failure, every snide remark, every dismissive glance became fuel. I learned to channel humiliation into innovation, to let every slight sharpen my focus. By the time my company, which I operated under the radar with a pseudonym, began to gain traction, I had already mastered the art of invisibility. On paper, I was a mid-level product developer. In reality, I was orchestrating multi-million-dollar security contracts with regional banks and government agencies. My family remained blissfully unaware, viewing me as the same struggling invisible child they had always dismissed. Little did they realize the quiet, unnoticed girl of their household had transformed into someone formidable. The very disdain they had nurtured, the constant comparisons to Ashley, had forged a determination that no encouragement could have replicated. As I looked across the reception hall tonight, observing Ashley laughing among family and friends, it struck me how far I had come. Every insult, every slight, every instance of invisible labor had been a lesson in perseverance and subtle strategy. Before I continue, I want you to consider if you have ever been overlooked or belittled for following your own path, for daring to pursue a dream that others could not comprehend. You understand the feeling of holding a secret strength in plain sight. For years, I had been quietly building, quietly learning, and quietly waiting for the moment when the scales would tip. And tonight, that tipping point was approaching in ways even I could not have fully anticipated. After years of quietly enduring my family's subtle dismissals, I had finally carved out a space where I was in control. My small Brooklyn apartment, cluttered with laptops, whiteboards, and half-empty coffee mugs, had become my sanctuary. It was here that I built Secure Horizon, a cybersecurity startup specializing in predictive threat algorithms. From the outside, it looked modest, just a single office space with flickering fluorescent lights, but behind those doors we were engineering solutions that Fortune 500 companies only dreamed of. To shield my identity from my family and the industry's prying eyes, I created a pseudonym, L. Bennett. On paper, L. Bennett was an enigmatic CEO, one who never appeared in public. I communicated through secure emails, voice-masked conference calls, and a meticulously curated group of trusted representatives. The anonymity served two purposes. It allowed me to operate without interference, and it gave me the freedom to prepare for the eventual moment when I could reclaim my narrative in a dramatic, irrevocable way. During those years, the subtle humiliations continued, often inadvertently. Ashley, ever vigilant, would post updates on social media about her lifestyle, her children's achievements, or her latest charitable events. One afternoon, I received an alert. A family group chat had accidentally CC'd the entire extended family, including me, with a message from Ashley that read, "Lauren's still surviving on handouts." Can you believe it? The group chat buzzed with reactions, some amused, some judgmental. My heart tightened for a moment, but then I smiled. That slip-up was nothing more than an unintentional hint of the chaos I had been preparing for. Carmen Flores, a veteran investor and one of the few people who understood the power of our technology, became my anchor. With an initial investment of $500,000, we refined our predictive cybersecurity system and landed our first client, a regional bank with heightened vulnerability concerns. Each successful contract was a step toward independence, each milestone a silent victory over the family who had deemed me incapable. I chose to live modestly in those years intentionally. My apartment was functional, my wardrobe simple, and my car a reliable yet unremarkable sedan. When friends invited me to upscale events, I politely declined or attended in understated attire, ensuring that any observers, including my family, would perceive me as unremarkable. It was a carefully constructed camouflage designed to lull them into complacency while the foundation of my future empire solidified. The world outside, however, was beginning to catch on. Secure Horizon expanded into healthcare, government systems, and international markets. Every major competitor attempted to uncover the elusive L. Bennett. Yet my identity remained secure. I had built layers of protection, legal, technical, and psychological, that rendered anyone's search futile. The paradox of my existence thrilled me. The same family who had judged me, humiliated me, and underestimated me daily believed I was still struggling, while I quietly commanded the attention and respect of industry leaders worldwide. Many twists punctuated this period. An anonymous email leaked from one of our representatives revealed snippets of our financial growth, which somehow circulated among Ashley's circle of friends. Rumors of my success reached the edges of my family's awareness, but they dismissed it as exaggeration. Each whisper, each hint of recognition only fueled my determination to wait for the perfect moment. I knew that the eventual revelation would be catastrophic, not merely for Ashley, but for the entire family hierarchy that had systematically undervalued me. In these years, the lessons were clear. Humility, patience, and discretion were as powerful as any algorithm we developed. I learned to turn slight humiliations into strategy, to convert anger into precision, and to channel every moment of being underestimated into calculated advantage. By the time Secure Horizon was preparing for a multi-million-dollar buyout, I was no longer the overlooked sister. I was the architect of my destiny, ready to expose the truth in a way that was as public as it was undeniable. Before I move forward, I want you to consider, have you ever kept a triumph hidden, waiting for the precise moment when it could resonate with perfect timing? For years, I had been invisible to the very people who were supposed to see me. Now the stage was set, the pieces in place, and the revelation would soon sweep through the reception hall, leaving no room for doubt about who I truly was. The day of Ashley's wedding arrived like a carefully choreographed performance, each detail polished to perfection. The grand ballroom at the Manhattan Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the floral arrangements a symphony of ivory and blush. Guests in formal attire mingled, champagne glasses in hand, unaware that tonight would become a stage for a reckoning. I arrived early, my understated dress and simple pearl earrings a deliberate contrast to the opulence around me. No one could guess that beneath the modest appearance I carried years of painstakingly built success. Ashley, radiant in her custom gown, moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her court. Her golden hair glimmered, and the smile that once drew admiration now radiated entitlement. From the moment I stepped into the room, she found an opportunity to assert dominance. During a brief pause before the ceremony, she leaned close to a cluster of relatives and whispered loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Some people just show up for the free food." A ripple of polite laughter followed her microaggression, perfectly executed. I allowed the comment to pass, my lips curving into a polite smile, my mind cataloging every reaction, every smirk. The first toast escalated tension further. Ashley, now at the podium, raised her glass, and in her practiced voice made a thinly veiled remark about family achievement. "To those who have always met expectations, and to those still learning what it means." A murmur passed through the room. My parents' eyes flickered briefly in my direction, but they offered nothing more than a faint, ambiguous glance. I remained composed, outwardly serene, inwardly calculating. Years of underestimation had honed patience into strategy. Midway through the evening, a subtle disruption occurred. Monica Fisher, my trusted attorney, arrived quietly carrying a sleek leather folder. We had coordinated this move months ago. As the music swelled, she approached, and I followed inconspicuous. The folder contained the legally binding documents of Secure Horizon's recent acquisition, including escrow accounts totaling $25 million, contracts signed and verified, and proof of my role as the architect behind every and Tua Foriasen's strategic decision. The room remained oblivious to the storm about to break. Ashley, unaware of Monica's arrival, continued her subtle humiliation campaign. She maneuvered to ensure I remained at the periphery of the VIP seating, strategically placing me away from the main tables. "You should be grateful we let you stay for the after-party," she said, voice intentionally amplified, her words sharp and public. "This isn't charity." Guests exchanged glances, some unsure whether to laugh or recoil. The humiliation was deliberate yet carefully framed as jest. Years of practiced cruelty had taught Ashley how to leverage social settings as instruments of dominance. Then came the crescendo. Monica handed me the folder, and I rose, stepping into the center of the room with quiet authority. Guests paused mid-conversation, sensing a shift. With composed confidence, I addressed the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering here tonight. I realize you may not know me as the founder and CEO of Secure Horizon, a company recently acquired for $25 million with escrow accounts fully funded and legally verified. I am that individual." She distributed copies of the key documents, and a hush fell over the ballroom. A subtle chime announced the live social media feed, projecting a headline across the screens in the hall: "Lauren Bennett, the tech visionary behind Secure Horizon, Forbes feature breaking today." The cameras captured stunned expressions, whispers replaced laughter, and Ashley's face turned pale, her confidence wavering for the first time that evening. The room, previously orchestrated around her dominance, now pivoted to acknowledge the truth: I had not been invisible. I had been underestimated. Guests recorded, posted, and shared the revelation in real time. The irony was palpable. The same group who had observed my supposed failures now witnessed undeniable success. Ashley's whispered taunts were rendered impotent by evidence, legal documentation, and the live broadcast. In that moment, humiliation reversed its direction, subtly but unmistakably. Years of unnoticed effort, resilience, and strategic concealment culminated in this public-controlled and indisputable vindication. Before the night ended, I allowed myself a brief private smile. The storm had arrived precisely as planned. I had remained composed, professional, and utterly unassailable, while every intended humiliation became a catalyst for my public recognition. In this elegant ballroom, amidst the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of astonishment, I finally reclaimed the narrative my family had long tried to define. This was more than a victory. It was a lesson in patience, strategy, and the art of timing. The shock in the room lingered long after the initial announcement. Guests whispered among themselves, phones lifted to record every stunned expression. Ashley, frozen mid-toast, now faced the undeniable truth that the sister she had dismissed, ridiculed, and publicly humiliated for decades had not only survived but thrived. Her carefully curated image of superiority was unraveling before everyone, amplified by the live social media feed and the Forbes feature now projected across the ballroom screens. It was a moment that shimmered with irony and poetic justice. Ashley's first instinct was denial. She opened her mouth, likely intending a retort or a flippant remark, but the weight of evidence silenced her. Documents confirming the $25 million in escrow accounts, the acquisition of Secure Horizon, and the legal notarization of my role as CEO were indisputable. She had orchestrated subtle humiliations, nudged guests with thinly veiled comments, and leaned on parental approval to assert dominance, but none of it mattered now. The narrative had shifted, and for the first time the tables had turned irrevocably. My parents, Patricia and Charles Bennett, exchanged hurried glances. I could read the unease in their expressions. For years, they had invested their pride and attention exclusively in Ashley, dismissing me as the quiet one, the sibling destined to be unnoticed. Now, every assumption, every bias, every silent judgment they had cast on my life bore witness to their miscalculation. The veneer of parental discernment cracked under the glaring spotlight of proof. The careful balance of family hierarchy was gone, and with it the power dynamics had flipped. The room was alive with murmurs and low gasps. Some guests approached to congratulate me, their curiosity mingled with astonishment. Friends who had long known my capabilities but never fully realized the scale of my success smiled knowingly, while acquaintances who had presumed failure now reevaluated everything they thought they knew. Even distant relatives, previously indifferent, lingered in awkward silence, their eyes darting between Ashley's pale face and the legal documents I held. The humiliation that had been my burden for so long now cast a shadow over them instead. Ashley attempted a feeble explanation, her voice tight, her words stumbling. "Lauren, this is well, you've always been modest with your achievements, I guess." Her attempt at humor fell flat. The room sensed the desperation behind it. I stepped forward deliberately, my tone calm, measured, but unmistakably firm. For years I was dismissed, belittled, and underestimated in this very room in front of the very people who claimed to know me. Tonight you all see the truth. Secure Horizon is mine, and my contributions are real, documented, and legally verified. This is not charity, this is competence. My words resonated crisp and undeniable, leaving no room for dismissal. The social media live feed captured every reaction. Phones lifted across the room, cameras recording the astonishment, the shock, and the subtle panic that rippled through Ashley and our parents. Within minutes, posts began trending, messages circulated, and the story gained traction beyond the walls of the ballroom. Friends, colleagues, and even industry leaders witnessed the revelation unfold in real time. The irony was exquisite. The very platform that Ashley had previously used to display wealth, status, and influence now amplified my vindication instead of hers. Monica Fisher, my attorney, guided me through the final formalities. Copies of contracts, escrow statements, and acquisition documents were distributed to select guests, including those who had participated in the subtle gossip and belittlement over the years. Each paper, each signature, and each notarization served as irrefutable proof that the narrative of incompetence, inadequacy, and invisibility was false. The family hierarchy that had once positioned Ashley at the pinnacle, leaving me in the shadows, was now publicly corrected. The culmination of events extended beyond personal vindication. The media coverage, legal documentation, and live exposure reinforced the broader lesson: credibility, hard work, and perseverance cannot be masked by perception bias or privilege. Guests and relatives witnessed the tangible results of years of meticulous planning, discretion, and determination. In the space of a single evening, decades of subtle humiliation, doubt, and familial favoritism were countered with undeniable reality. Ashley, visibly shaken, struggled to maintain composure. The carefully constructed facade of control, entitlement, and superiority faltered under the weight of indisputable evidence. Her attempts at maintaining social grace, at salvaging face, were futile. My parents, too, were left grappling with the reality that the child they had underestimated, whose achievements they had downplayed, had orchestrated a moment of exposure that was both public and permanent. Their silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the whispered critiques that had haunted me for years. In that moment, I felt a profound shift, not just in perception, but in power, autonomy, and emotional clarity. The very tools of humiliation that had been used against me, social settings, public commentary, peer judgment, were now instruments of revelation. The revenge was not vindictive in spirit, it was precise, deliberate, and controlled. Every detail, every action had been executed with the understanding that justice need not be loud to be effective. It required patience, strategy, and impeccable timing. As the evening drew to a close, I allowed myself a quiet reflection. The storm had passed, leaving clarity and validation in its wake. Friends approached, sharing congratulations and astonishment. Colleagues recognized the significance of the demonstration, and even distant relatives began to acknowledge, if hesitantly, the scope of my achievements. The public nature of the revelation ensured that the lesson would not be forgotten nor easily dismissed. In the days that followed, the exposure reverberated far beyond the wedding hall. Industry publications highlighted Secure Horizon's success and my role as CEO. Social media amplified every aspect of the event, from Ashley's faltering remarks to the distribution of acquisition documents. The network I had carefully cultivated, both professionally and personally, expanded, rapidly bringing opportunities, recognition, and validation that had long been deferred. The family dynamic, once rigid and skewed, was now recalibrated by reality. Ashley's public image suffered, her credibility questioned by both peers and family alike. Patricia and Charles Bennett were left to reconcile their assumptions and biases with the undeniable truth of my achievements. The reversal of fortune, meticulously orchestrated, sent a clear message: underestimation, humiliation, and favoritism have consequences, and true merit cannot remain hidden indefinitely. By the end of the week, the narrative was firmly established. I had reclaimed my identity, asserted my accomplishments, and demonstrated with irrefutable evidence that the overlooked sibling could command respect, power, and admiration. What had once been a source of pain, the relentless comparisons, the subtle family cruelties, the whispers of inadequacy, had been transformed into a strategic advantage, a narrative weapon wielded with precision. And as I reflected on the events, I knew that the consequences of patience, planning, and steadfast commitment would resonate for years, not just within my family, but across my professional and social spheres. 6 months had passed since the dramatic exposure at Ashley's wedding, and the world I had carefully built for myself had settled into a rhythm of independence, purpose, and fulfillment. I had relocated from my modest Brooklyn apartment to a modern loft in downtown Manhattan, a space filled with light books and personal mementos that reflected the life I had worked so hard to create. The view of the skyline from my balcony reminded me daily of how far I had come from the overlooked, underestimated sibling to a woman whose accomplishments were indisputable. The city buzzed below, yet within my home there was a sense of calm and clarity that I had never known growing up under the constant weight of family expectation. In the months following the wedding, I focused on expanding Secure Horizons operations, moving beyond national clients to international cybersecurity projects. Each contract brought not only financial security, but the kind of recognition I had always deserved but never received from my family. The company's success allowed me to cultivate a new network of mentors, colleagues, and collaborators who valued skill, integrity, and vision over inherited status. It was a stark contrast to the family gatherings of my youth, where appearance and favor often mattered more than competence or effort. Beyond professional growth, I built what I now call my chosen family, a network of friends, partners, and protégés who shared my values and supported one another unconditionally. Carmen Flores, my longtime investor and confidant, became more than a business partner. She was a trusted friend whose insight and encouragement had been instrumental in shaping Secure Horizon. We established mentoring programs for young women entering the technology sector, offering guidance, scholarships, and internships to those overlooked by conventional systems. In doing so, I found profound satisfaction in creating opportunities for others to thrive, opportunities that had been denied to me in my own youth. The events at the wedding had permanently altered my family's perception, though not always in the ways they intended. My parents attempted to re-establish contact, but their motives were transparent. Charles called intermittently, offering advice on investment opportunities, while Patricia reached out under the guise of concern, often hinting at social appearances where my involvement might enhance their reputation. Ashley, still reeling from public exposure, maintained an awkward civility, but rarely reached beyond superficial conversation. I allowed only measured contact, valuing boundaries that protected my emotional well-being and my hard-earned independence. I had also taken the opportunity to reflect deeply on the lessons embedded in my journey. For years, I had measured my worth by standards imposed by others, constantly seeking approval from those who could not see it. The revelation at the wedding was more than public vindication. It was a personal turning point. I had learned that true success is not measured by the acknowledgement of others, but by the integrity, perseverance, and impact of one's actions. Money, power, and recognition followed naturally when these foundations were secure, yet the true reward lay in the freedom to live authentically. My daily routine now reflected this philosophy. Mornings began with quiet reflection and planning, interspersed with correspondence with global clients and mentees. Afternoons often involved meetings with teams developing innovative security solutions or brainstorming community initiatives that supported marginalized groups in technology. Evenings were reserved for reading personal projects and spending time with friends who had proven their loyalty and understanding over the years. Life had become a balance of purpose and pleasure, productivity and contemplation. A rhythm I had crafted deliberately, free from the constant comparison and judgment that had defined my childhood. The financial stability provided by Secure Horizons acquisition also allowed me to engage in philanthropic initiatives. I invested in local education programs, particularly those encouraging young women to pursue STEM careers, and supported organizations that provided resources and mentorship to individuals estranged from unsupportive families. Each contribution felt like a continuation of the silent generosity I had practiced earlier in life, now amplified by transparency and intention rather than anonymity. Looking back, the events of the past year were a testament to resilience, strategic patience, and the importance of self-determination. I had transformed humiliation into empowerment, oversight into opportunity, and neglect into motivation. While my family's dynamics remained complex, I no longer defined my worth through their perception. Instead, I measured success by the tangible impact I created, the lives I touched, and the freedom to live according to my values. I often reflect on the broader lesson embedded in this journey. Blood relations do not automatically confer respect, loyalty, or understanding. True family, whether chosen or given, is built through consistent care, support, and shared values. Forgiveness, when appropriate, is a choice, not an obligation. Respect is earned through action, not assumed by proximity or tradition. My story is not merely one of financial triumph or public vindication. It is an affirmation that personal agency, integrity, and deliberate action can redefine one's life and narrative, even when starting from a place of neglect or underestimation. So I ask you, as you watch or read this story, have you ever had to redefine your understanding of family? Have you discovered that the people who share your blood may not be the ones who truly support you, and that those you choose can become your greatest source of strength? Consider your own journey, the hidden talents, the quiet resilience, and the moments of patience that may yet yield transformation. The path may be challenging, the victories delayed, but the eventual freedom, the knowledge that your life reflects your choices and values, is worth every step of the way. In this new chapter of life, I embrace the calm, the autonomy, and the profound satisfaction that comes from building a legacy not for approval but for purpose. The past, with all its betrayals and humiliations, has become a foundation for wisdom and empowerment. And as I continue forward, I do so not as the overlooked sibling, but as a woman whose life is defined by intentionality, accomplishment, and the freedom to write her own story.